access. If you've created a database, then you can of course add or edit the models, and then once you're ready to run the models, then you can run the form, configure it, and hit the play button to finish it. Now I'm going to start out with creating and changing the database. So I'll go ahead and select it, go ahead and hit next. We'll go ahead and browse to the directory you want to go to, and I'm just going to type in the file name and hit open. That's pretty much it. It's telling me now which database I'm using, so now I'm ready to add the models. So I'll go ahead and hit next. I'm going to use the current open model, so I'll hit next. Here's the mobile gantry assembly. So I'm going to go down to captured assembly structure, and this will let me select on which assemblies or parts I need to edit or modify. So I'll go ahead and next on that. And it takes me to the design of form, but I'm going to go ahead and select on the capture button here. It takes me a little bit. So next I'm going to go ahead and open up the universal beam. And we need to capture some of the dimensions that are in here. So I'm going to go to the dimensions and features part here. And you have to pay close attention on how these things are modeled. So what we've done is from this left plane to the right end plane, these are actually the two planes of the center of my uprights. So if I double click on the right end plane, you can see I can control the distance of the planes, which are going to be the centers of the uprights. So all I got to do is select on the 1800 dimension, and you can see it's going to go ahead and grab that address. So I'm going to go ahead and add in here beam length, and go ahead and hit add. And that adds it to a dimension that can be driven by DriveWorks. Next I want to go ahead and configure the beam height. So I'm just going to double click on the feature itself, find the 203 dimension, go ahead and select on it, and also add in beam height. And we'll add. And those are all the dimensions we're doing for this guy, so we'll go ahead and close out of that. Next we'll take a look at the legs, so we'll go ahead and open them. And we'll go through the same exercise. So I'm going to double click on the, well, before I do that, I've got to go back to the add edit models. I want to select on the leg, just double click it, and this is the dialog I need to be into. So I'm going to go to the, let's try the upper layout. Oops, it's going to be the lower layout, and it's the 3000 dimension, so that's the overall height. So again, it's grabbing that. We'll go ahead and label that as leg height. Add that. And I'm also going to add the 400 millimeter dimension. We'll go ahead and call that the minimum overlap. And add that. Now we don't only have the options for dimensions, but we also can do features themselves. So in some configurations, the inner diagonal is not needed. So if I'll go ahead and select on that, and that's just the mirror of that feature, I can go ahead and add that as the feature. And you can rename it to make it a little bit easier if you haven't renamed it already in the Solidworks feature. So that looks pretty good. We'll go ahead and close out of this model. We're back into the assembly. I'm going to go back to edit, add. I'll go ahead and double click on the mobile gantry, and I'm going to go click on some custom properties. And so I may be wanting to change the project number and the safe working load. So I'm going to go ahead and add those to my configurations. Now in DriveWorks, the assembly actually drives the drawing. So if I go to the drawings and configurations, I can go ahead and browse for one that's already out there. So I'm going to select on the mobile gantry drawing file, go ahead and hit open. Then I'm going to go back to captured models, double click on the mobile gantry, the captured models, and I'm going to go to the universal beam. So I'll double click on that. You can see it now automatically opens that. I'm going to go down to its drawings and configurations. I'm going to go ahead and check the option to switch configurations by a rule. And from that, I'm going to go ahead and go into my form designer. I'll go ahead and close out of this, get back into my assembly. So the first thing I'm going to ask is for a project number. Now we got a checkbox that the project number is required, so then we'll go ahead and say next. And that variable is now added to the form. I'm going to go ahead and add. I'm going to create another one. For this one, I'm going to call it safe working load For the type, I'm going to say a drop down. It is required. And then my options for the drop down, I'm going to type these in. So I have 500 kilogram, 1000 kilogram, and make sure you put enter after each of these. And one more, we'll do 1500 kilograms. We'll hit next, and that adds it. So we need to add another one. This one is going to be the opening height. This one I'm going to get a little fancy. I'm going to say it's a spin button. So this gives me a minimum value of 1500 and a maximum value of 2500, and then I can tell it what the incremental value is. So I'm going to do 50. So we'll go ahead and say next. We'll go ahead and add one more. This is going to be the opening width. This one I'm going to do as a numeric text box. With can go from 1500 to 4000. And we'll go next. So you can think of these as the parameters that you're going to drive on your form. And then with these parameters, I'm going to create some rules that actually drive the dimensions and the features and stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the rules. So this kind of list, I have 3 different file names. I have the leg, which is the exact same file name, a universal beam, and then the actual assembly itself. So I'm going to go ahead and edit that one first. Go ahead and just select that and hit next. So in the list, I'm going to double click on mobile gantry here. And for the inputs, it's got a little drop down. I'm going to select on the project number. And I'll go ahead and click OK. Next, I create a rule for the universal beam, so I'll double click on that. For the inputs, I'm going to go ahead and get project number. Now for this file name, I'm going to do the project number. I'm going to go ahead and type this up, and I'm going to put in quotes, space in quotes. So it's got the project number and then a space. Then I want to grab the inputs for opening width. So that's going to automatically put the number in there for the width. And then I'm going to add some more text. So I'm going to say it's that. I'm going to put a space there and say wide. And then inputs, safe working load. And then finish it with and space, safe working load. So for an example, if the project number is project number 1, it's going to say 1, then it'll have a space. If the opening width is 1600, it'll say 1600 wide, and then it'll say what the working load is. So say for instance it's 1500 kilogram safe working load, and that'll be the actual file name for this part. So I'll go ahead and say OK. And the last but not least, the leg. Go ahead and double click on that. This one I also want to get to the project number and the opening height, and then I'm going to add some text after it. So I'm going to put and space HIGH and hit OK. Next I'm going to go ahead and preview this real quick. So on the configurations, I'm just going to kind of walk this down. So I'm going to uncheck the edit. I'm done with the file names. Check on the configurations. Then I'll hit next. So on the configuration, we'll just double click on the universal beam. And for the inputs here, I'm going to set this to safe working load and go ahead and hit OK. And we'll do it again. We'll go back, check, uncheck, go into custom properties. We'll start off with the project and just double click that. And of course the project, we're linking it to the project number. So we'll go ahead and say OK. Safe working load, double click on that. Input, safe working load, and hit OK. So then I'll go back to previous. And now for the fun part of setting up some of the dimensions. So we'll select on that, hit next. And we'll start off with leg height. Again, just double click. For the inputs, we'll just say opening height. So when I change the opening height variable,